The Courtship of Everdeen Treebright, a Victorian romance. The year was 1874, and Meridian streets carried the mingled scents of coal smoke and magnolia blossoms. Everdeen Treebright, with almond-shaped eyes behind black-rimmed spectacles and a soft, knowing smile, had reached the age society deemed proper for marriage. Yet she herself felt no urgency until 3 suitors emerged, each drawn to her presence like moths to lantern light. She first noticed them all on the same spring afternoon. Noah Whitcombe stood outside Caldwell's bookshop, a volume tucked under his arm, ink stains upon his cuffs. When their eyes met, he offered a slight bow, and she noticed the way his left hand remained partially closed, as if guarding something. His gaze was steady, patient, the kind that waited for an invitation rather than demanding one. Malachi Duvall arrived home from his travels that same week, and the whole of Meridian seemed to brighten with his return. His laughter carried through Mrs. Langford's garden party, and when he spotted Everdeen among the roses, he crossed to her with the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted his welcome. "Miss Treebright," he said, his eyes alight with genuine pleasure, "I've thought of you often in my travels. There's a particular bridge in Florence that shares your grace." And then there was Reginald Ravencroft, the magistrate's nephew, returned from university abroad. Everdeen had known him as a boy, the sort who pulled ribbons from girls' hair and mocked those he deemed beneath him. But the man who bowed before her at Sunday service bore little resemblance to that child. His features had refined into something striking. His posture spoke of continental polish, and when he kissed her gloved hand, his eyes held hers with unsettling intensity. "Miss Treebright," he murmured, "I've returned to find Meridian much changed. Or perhaps it is only that I'm finally seeing it clearly." Her aunt leaned close as they departed the church. "The Ravencrofts are among the finest families in England, dear. Such a connection would be—" She trailed off meaningfully, but Everdeen heard what remained unspoken. "Advantageous." The gifts arrived within days of each other. Noah's came first, a slim volume bound in dark leather, its pages filled with poetry she had once mentioned admiring. Inside the cover, in his careful script, "For the quiet moments when words matter most." When she opened it that evening by lamplight, she found he had marked certain passages with violet ribbons, each one seeming to speak to conversations they had shared. Malachi's gift arrived with characteristic flair, a wooden box containing pressed flowers from his travels, each labeled with the place and date of collection. But it was the letter accompanying them that caught her attention. "I found myself collecting beauty wherever I went, and realized I was trying to bring the world to someone who already contained its best parts." The words were bold, yes, but there was genuine feeling beneath the flourish. Reginald's gift came last, delivered by a servant in Ravencroft livery. Inside an elegant case lay a first edition of a book she had once loved as a child, one she'd mentioned to her cousin perhaps 5 years prior. The accompanying note read, "I'm told this brought you joy once. I should like to learn what brings you joy now." That evening, Everdeen sat in her room, the 3 gifts arranged before her. Noah had listened to her own words. Malachi had shared his world while thinking of her. Reginald had researched her, done his homework. It was thoughtful, certainly, but something about it felt second-hand, like receiving a portrait painted by someone who had only heard you described. "Gentlemen," Everdeen announced at her aunt's spring luncheon, where all 3 suitors had gathered with studied casualness, "I find myself in an unusual position. Society would have me choose based on advantage or charm or steadiness alone. But I should like to know you better before any such choice is made." She set down her teacup with deliberate care. "Therefore, I propose a series of inquiries. Simple questions, simple tests, nothing that should trouble a genuine heart." Noah's scarred hand rested on the table, and she saw him flex it unconsciously, a habit she had noticed when he was thinking. Malachi leaned forward with interest, his strong, soft hands relaxed and open. Reginald's expression remained composed, confident, as if this were merely another examination he was destined to pass. "The first test," she continued, meeting each of their eyes in turn, "concerns a simple matter. What is my favorite flower?" They were given 1 week. Noah arrived first, on a grey morning when rain threatened. He carried no grand bouquet, only a small gathering of violets, their purple faces turned upward. "These grow in the grove where you walk at evening," he said quietly. "I've seen you touch them as you pass. They're modest flowers, easily overlooked, but they return each spring with quiet loyalty." His scarred hand trembled slightly as he offered them, and Everdeen felt something in her chest tighten at the vulnerability in the gesture. Malachi came at midday, his arrival preceded by the sound of his laughter with her uncle in the hall. But when he entered the parlor, his expression was unexpectedly serious. "I brought you roses," he said, presenting a bouquet of pale pink blooms. "Because everyone expects roses, but I also brought these." From his coat, he withdrew a small posy of violets, wild and slightly disheveled. "I remembered a conversation we had last autumn about the flowers you loved as a child, the ones that didn't demand attention but gave it freely. I thought, perhaps those are still your favorites." Everdeen accepted both bouquets, caught off guard by his dual offering, spectacle and substance intertwined. Reginald arrived precisely at the appointed hour, bearing an enormous arrangement of exotic blooms she couldn't name. "Violets," he announced, gesturing to the centerpiece of his creation, "which your Aunt Constance assured me were your particular favorite. I've had them supplemented with flora from the continent to create something worthy of your beauty." The arrangement was stunning, museum quality, and utterly wrong in its excess. "Thank you," Everdeen said to each of them, her voice carefully neutral. "You've all been most thoughtful." But that night, alone in her room, it was Noah's simple gathering and Malachi's wild posies that she placed in water by her window. Reginald's magnificent arrangement remained downstairs, where her aunt fussed over it with delight. "My second test," Everdeen announced the following week, "concerns my pastimes. Honor what brings me joy, and show me how you might share in it." Noah arrived 3 days later with a leather journal, its cover embossed with a delicate pattern of violets. Inside, he had filled the first pages with his own careful sketches: the oak grove where she walked, the stone bench in her garden, the view from her favorite window. The remaining pages were blank. "For your thoughts," he said, and the scarred hand that offered it shook only slightly. "I know you keep your reflections private, but I hoped perhaps you might let me understand your world through what you choose to share." Everdeen felt the quality of his attention like warmth from a hearth, steady, reliable, life-sustaining. Malachi requested she join him in her own parlor the following evening. When she arrived, he had transformed the space, candles replacing the gas lamps, the furniture rearranged to create an intimate theater. He stood at the center, a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice in his hands. I remember when you attended the theatrical production last winter, he said, his voice carrying a different quality now, not performing, but present. I was seated 3 rows behind you. I watched you lean forward during Elizabeth and Darcy's confrontation at Hunsford, watched you smile when she visited Pemberley. So I thought, he opened the book. I'd bring those moments back to you. And then he read, not with theatrical bombast, but with genuine feeling. He gave voice to Elizabeth's sharp wit and Darcy's proud struggle, and when he reached the lines about Darcy's transformation, what do I not owe you? You taught me a lesson, hard indeed at first, but most advantageous. His eyes found hers, and she understood he was speaking of more than Austen's characters. You've always wanted to see England, he said, when he finished, his voice soft. I know I cannot give you that journey tomorrow, but I hoped I might bring a piece of it to you tonight. Everdeen found her hands trembling. This was not spectacle for spectacle's sake. This was intimacy, offered with both hands open. Reginald came last, as if he'd been timing his approach for maximum impact. He brought a violinist, a professional from the city, and had researched her favorite composers through conversations with her music teacher. The performance was flawless, technically perfect. I'm told you studied piano as a child, he said afterward, his handsome features earnest, and that you favored Mozart above all others. I thought a private concert might please you. It did please her. How could it not? And yet, he had learned these things about her without learning them from her. Every detail correct, every gesture thoughtful, but filtered through the words of others. The evening was warm, and Everdeen invited all 3 to walk with her in the garden, where lanterns hung from the magnolia trees and violets bordered the stone paths. Her aunt and uncle remained at a discreet distance, chaperoning but not intruding. I have questions, Everdeen said, of a more personal nature. You need not answer anything that discomforts you, but I should like to understand not just what you do, but who you are. She turned first to Noah, where he stood, with one hand resting on a garden column, the scarred one tucked partially behind his back. What do you fear, Mr. Whitcombe? Noah was quiet for a long moment, and she watched him struggle with vulnerability. I fear, he said finally, that my steadiness might be mistaken for lack of feeling, that my patience might seem like indifference. This, he raised his scarred hand, sometimes makes me slower at tasks, more careful. People mistake caution for coldness. I fear you might do the same. His honesty struck her like a bell. She turned to Malachi next. And you, Mr. Duvall, what troubles your heart? Malachi's easy smile faltered, and for a moment she saw past his brightness to something more complex beneath. I'm impetuous, he admitted. My heart leads before my head, and I've been careless with others' feelings in the past, chasing the next adventure without considering those I left behind. I fear that my fire might burn too hot, too fast, and consume what I most wish to preserve. He met her eyes. I fear I might hurt you without meaning to. The vulnerability in his confession moved her deeply. Finally, she addressed Reginald. Mr. Ravencroft, we knew each other as children. You were not always kind to me then. What has changed? Reginald had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was a fool, he said bluntly. A boy who confused power with worth, who thought cruelty was clever. University, travel, these things taught me that the world is larger than Meridian, and that the people I once dismissed possessed depths I lacked the maturity to see. He stepped closer. I've spent considerable effort learning who you've become. Miss Treebright. I hope you might give me the opportunity to show you who I am now, rather than who I was." It was a good answer. Perhaps too good, too prepared, too polished. But the sentiment seemed genuine enough. "And one more question," Everdeen said, addressing all three. "If you had to choose between your spouse's happiness and your children's happiness, which would you choose?" Noah answered first. "A false choice, I think. Children thrive when their parents love each other well. I would choose my spouse, because in doing so, I choose the foundation upon which our children's happiness would be built." Malachi nodded slowly. "I agree with Noah, though I'd say it differently. I'd choose passion, the kind that shows children what it means to truly love someone, not to place my spouse above them, but to demonstrate that devotion doesn't diminish with sharing." Reginald's answer was more pragmatic. "A wise man ensures his wife's contentment, for she shapes the home. A happy wife creates happy children. Therefore, attending to my spouse's needs becomes attending to my children's needs. They are not separate concerns." All three answers were thoughtful. All three showed care, and yet each revealed something different. Noah's quiet wisdom, Malachi's passionate idealism, Reginald's strategic thinking. Everdeen found herself no closer to a decision than before. The next day, 2 invitations arrived in the same post. The first, on thick cream paper, invited the Treebright family to Magistrate Harrington's summer gala, the social event of the season, attended by everyone of importance. The second, simpler but no less warm, invited them to her Aunt Constance's sisters' gathering, a family affair, intimate and unpretentious. "You must attend the magistrate's gala," Aunt Constance insisted, "especially with Reginald paying you such marked attention. The connections, my dear." But Everdeen felt the weight of expectation pressing against her chest like a corset laced too tight. "I shall attend the family gathering," she announced quietly, "and my suitors may follow or not, as they see fit." Noah sent word immediately that he would attend the family event, along with a rare volume for her uncle's library. "Where you go, I follow," his note read simply. Malachi appeared at her door the next morning, grinning. "A gala, or a genuine evening with people who love you? There's no competition, Everdeen. I'll bring my stories and my company if you'll have them." Reginald, however, looked troubled when she told him. "The magistrate's gala would... that is, my uncle expects..." He trailed off, then seemed to gather himself. "But if this is where you'll be, then this is where I must be as well. Though I confess, I had hoped to dance with you in a ballroom." At the family gathering, Noah was perfectly at ease, conversing thoughtfully with her elderly relatives and showing genuine interest in her cousin's childhood tales. His scarred hand rested openly on the table now, no longer hidden. Malachi charmed everyone effortlessly, but it was his willingness to sit with her quiet grandmother for nearly an hour, simply listening to old stories, that touched Everdeen most. His fire had a warmth that drew people close without consuming them. Reginald seemed slightly out of place at first, accustomed to grander settings, but he made a visible effort, and Everdeen watched him overcome his discomfort to engage authentically with her family. When her young cousin spilled tea on Reginald's expensive coat, he laughed it off with grace she hadn't expected. Perhaps people could change after all. Meridian, like all small cities, thrived on speculation. At Mrs. Langford's Tuesday tea, the ladies leaned close over their porcelain cups, voices hushed but eager. "I heard she's already chosen Noah Whitcombe," whispered Mrs. Eleanor Pritchard. "Saw them walking in the grove together, quite alone." "Nonsense," Mrs. Langford countered. Malachi Duvall has been seen leaving her home at all hours. Mark my words, she'll choose adventure over scholarship. You're both mistaken, a third voice interjected. The magistrate's nephew has been calling regularly. The Ravencrofts have connections across the Atlantic. It would be the match of the season. Everdeen, entering the room at that moment with her aunt, heard enough to understand she was the subject of intense scrutiny. The conversations died like candles in wind, replaced by overly bright greetings. She smiled, poured her tea, and said nothing. But inside, she felt the pressure mounting, the weight of others' expectations pressing against her own uncertain heart. One evening, Noah requested a private walk, properly chaperoned, with her aunt visible on the veranda. They moved along the garden path, where violets grew wild at the edges, and lantern light filtered through magnolia leaves. Miss Treebright, Everdeen, if I may. He stopped walking, turning to face her. I must speak plainly. His scarred hand flexed, and she realized it was his tell, the gesture he made when emotion overcame composure. I am not wealthy like Ravencroft, nor exciting like Duvall. I have little to offer beyond this. He gestured to himself with something like frustration, a scholar's modest income and a damaged hand that limits certain work. I'm too serious, I know, too careful. I bore you, perhaps. You don't, Everdeen began, but he pressed on. What I have is constancy, patience, the absolute certainty that I see you, not the version others expect you to be, but who you truly are. And I love that person, not for advantage, not for the thrill of conquest, but because your mind challenges me, your kindness humbles me, and your presence makes every room feel like coming home. His voice cracked slightly on the last words, and she watched him struggle to maintain composure. I don't know if that's enough, but it's everything I have to give. Everdeen felt tears prick at her eyes. Noah. You needn't answer now, he said quickly. I only wanted you to know, to be certain you knew. He bowed and stepped back, giving her space. But his eyes held hers for one more moment. Steady, patient, and entirely hers, if she wanted them. 2 days later, Malachi asked to meet her in the oak grove at sunset. She arrived to find him already there, leaning against an ancient trunk, his usual brightness dimmed to something softer. I almost didn't come back to Meridian, he said, without preamble. Did you know that? I had offers to continue traveling, to write about my adventures. I could have stayed in Florence or pushed on to Constantinople. Why didn't you? Everdeen asked quietly. His smile was rueful. Because I kept thinking about violet eyes behind spectacles, about a woman who listened to my stories with genuine interest but never let me get away with embellishments. Because every beautiful thing I saw made me think, Everdeen would love this, or I wish Everdeen were here to see this. And I realized, he pushed off from the tree, moving closer. I realized I was trying to become someone worthy of you. Malachi let me finish. His strong, soft hands caught hers gently. I know what people think. That I'm all flash and no substance, that I'll bore quickly and move on. And maybe, his voice dropped, maybe they're not entirely wrong. I've been careless before, impulsive. But with you, Everdeen, with you, I want to stay. I want to build a life full of joy and discovery, full of those moments that make you lean forward in your seat like you did at that play. I want to give you England and beyond. But more than that, I want to give you every ordinary evening between the adventures, because those are the moments that matter most. She looked up at him, this man who burned so brightly, and saw the steadiness beneath the flame. You're afraid you'll hurt me, Terrified, he admitted. But I'm more afraid of never trying. Reginald requested a formal audience with her aunt and uncle present. He arrived in full formal dress, every inch the gentleman, and Everdeen felt a strange disconnect, as if she were watching a play rather than living a moment. Mr. and Mrs. Treebright, he began, addressing her guardians with perfect courtesy, I come to request permission to court your niece with the intention of marriage. Her uncle leaned forward. And what are your intentions, young man? Your prospects? I have estates in England, Reginald replied smoothly. A seat in Parliament is not beyond reach, given my family connections. I can offer Miss Treebright security, position, and a life of considerable comfort. She would want for nothing. You would take her to England? Her aunt asked, and Everdeen heard the calculation in her voice, weighing loss against advantage. I would, though naturally she would return to visit regularly. Everyone looked at Everdeen, waiting. She felt the expectation like humidity before a storm, heavy, oppressive, inevitable. Mr. Ravencroft, she said carefully, you've been most thorough in your research. You know my favorite flower, my preferred composers, the books I loved as a child. You've spoken to my family, my teachers, my friends. You've constructed a portrait of me from others' descriptions. His confident expression flickered. I wish to know you well. But you've learned about me, not learned me. Can you tell me what I think about when I walk alone in the grove at evening? What I dream of beyond the practical? What fears keep me awake at night? She kept her voice gentle but firm. You've done your homework admirably, sir, but love is not an examination one passes through proper study. Reginald's handsome face flushed, and she saw something flash in his eyes. Was it anger? Embarrassment? Then he seemed to collect himself. Then teach me, he said quietly. I may have approached this poorly, but my regard is genuine. I'm offering you a life beyond Meridian, beyond these provincial limitations, a chance to see the England you dream of, to be more than... He gestured vaguely at their surroundings. More than what? She asked, her voice sharpening. More than myself. The silence that followed was crushing. That's not what I meant, Reginald said, but they both knew the damage was done. In trying to offer her advancement, he'd revealed that he saw her current life as something to escape from, rather than something to build upon. Her aunt and uncle exchanged glances, and Everdeen saw her aunt's disappointment war with her growing understanding. I think, Everdeen said gently, that we need not make any decisions this evening. Sleep eluded Everdeen that night. She sat by her window, looking out at the garden where lanterns still glowed faintly among the magnolias. 3 men, 3 different forms of devotion, 3 possible futures. Noah offered constancy, a steady flame that would never burn out but might never dazzle either. Could she be content with quiet devotion, knowing she'd never see Florence or Constantinople? Would his seriousness eventually feel like restraint? Malachi offered passion, bright and warm and exhilarating, but could fire sustain? Would his impulsiveness hurt her despite his best intentions? Could adventure and stability coexist? Reginald offered advancement, England, position, security. He had shown growth from his childhood cruelty, made genuine effort. But could she love someone who had learned her second hand, who saw her current life as something to transcend? As dawn broke, Everdeen made her decision. She would set one final test, not for them, but for herself. Everdeen invited all 3 suitors to the garden on a warm afternoon. Her aunt and uncle watched from the veranda, lending propriety to the meeting. "Gentlemen," she began, standing beneath the magnolia tree where this had all begun, "I have one final request. It is perhaps unconventional, but then, this entire courtship has been rather unconventional." All three waited, attentive. "I should like to see your hands, all of you, and I should like you to tell me what they say about who you are." The request clearly surprised them, but Noah stepped forward first. He extended both hands, no longer hiding the scarred left one. The burn mark ran from his knuckles to his wrist, leaving the skin puckered and slightly stiff. "I got this staying up too late with a book I couldn't put down," he said quietly. "I was careless with the lamp oil, too absorbed in ideas to notice the danger. It reminds me daily that passion and care must coexist, that loving something deeply means protecting it properly." He flexed the damaged hand. "It's not as strong as it was. Some tasks take me longer now, but it taught me patience and the value of what I can still do rather than mourning what I cannot." Everdeen took his hands in hers, feeling the roughness of the scar, the deliberate way he compensated for the stiffness. These were hands that had turned thousands of pages, that wrote with careful precision, that would hold her gently but firmly. Malachi came next, extending his hands palm up. They were strong but surprisingly soft, unmarked by labor. "These are gentlemen's hands," he said with his characteristic honesty. "I've never done manual work, never built anything with them except perhaps connections, experiences. I've used them to write, to gesture while telling stories, to help others up when they've stumbled." He met her eyes. "They're soft because I've been fortunate, but they're strong enough to hold on to what matters and open enough to let go when they should." She touched his palms, feeling their warmth, their potential. These were hands that would applaud her achievements, that would cup her face tenderly, that would reach for her in excitement to share the next discovery. Finally, Reginald offered his hands. They were immaculate, manicured, unmarked, the hands of privilege and careful maintenance. "These hands have held nothing but advantages," he admitted, and she heard something new in his voice. Self-awareness, perhaps even shame. "I've never struggled, never scarred myself through careless passion, never built calluses through genuine work. They're useless, really, ornamental." He looked at them as if seeing them clearly for the first time. "But I would learn to use them properly if given the chance. They could learn to build something real, rather than simply grasping at what others have built." It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd said to her. Everdeen stepped back, looking at all three of them. These men who had competed for her hand, who had shown her different versions of devotion, who had challenged her to understand what she truly wanted. "I need to tell you all something," Everdeen began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "These past weeks have been extraordinary. Each of you has shown me something valuable, something true. You've made this decision nearly impossible." She turned first to Reginald. "Mr. Ravencroft, you have shown remarkable growth from the boy I once knew. Your effort to know me, even if filtered through others, demonstrates real care. Your honesty just now about your hands, that showed me someone capable of genuine self-reflection." She paused. "But I cannot be your project for self-improvement, nor can I be the achievement that proves you've changed. You need to complete that journey for yourself, not for me." Reginald's jaw tightened, but he nodded with dignity. "I understand, and you're right. I wish—" He trailed off, then collected himself. "I wish you every happiness, Miss Treebright. Truly." He bowed and stepped back, and she saw in his eyes that he meant it. She turned next to Malachi, and her voice softened. You have shown me what it means to be truly seen. Your fire, your joy, your genuine passion for life. These are gifts. The way you read to me, the way you brought the world to my doorstep while acknowledging my dreams, that was intimacy of the highest order. Malachi's expression brightened with hope. But, she continued gently, and watched his face fall, I'm afraid, not of you, but of myself. Your brightness is so compelling that I fear I might lose myself in it, might become someone who follows your adventures rather than pursuing my own. She stepped closer, touching his arm. You need someone who matches your fire, who can stand in the blaze with you without being consumed. I'm not certain I'm that person, and you need to be certain before you commit to staying. Malachi opened his mouth, closed it, then smiled ruefully. You're saying I need to be sure I won't hurt you. And I can't promise that, can I? Not yet. Not until I've proven it to myself. His eyes shimmered. But Everdeen, I know, she whispered. And that's what makes this so hard. Finally, she turned to Noah. His scarred hand was trembling. You saw me first, she said quietly. Before any of this began, before the tests and the competition, you simply saw me. The violets, the poetry, the journal with blank pages waiting for my thoughts. These weren't grand gestures. They were acts of genuine attention. Everdeen, he began, but she held up a hand. Your fear is that your steadiness might seem like indifference. But Noah, steadiness is not the absence of passion. It's passion with direction. It's choosing someone every day, not just in the bright moments, but in the ordinary ones. She felt tears prick her eyes. It's being the kind of person who ruins his hand because he loves ideas too much to be cautious, and then learning patience from the injury. It's finding beauty in small, returning things like violets, rather than needing constant novelty. It's being willing to wait while I find my own words, rather than filling every silence for me. She took his scarred hand in both of hers. I choose you, Noah Whitcombe, not because you're the safe choice or the practical choice, but because your quiet devotion feels like coming home. Because I want to fill those blank pages with thoughts I can share with you. Because your steadiness doesn't diminish me. It gives me a foundation from which to grow. Noah's composure finally cracked. His free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb catching the tear that slipped down her cheek. I promise, he said hoarsely, that you will never wonder where you stand with me, that my constancy will never be confusion, that I will love you not just in grand moments, but in every small one between. I know, she whispered. That's why I choose you. Malachi left Meridian 2 weeks later, but not before hosting a farewell dinner to which he invited both Everdeen and Noah. He raised his glass in a toast that brought tears to several eyes. To love in all its forms, he said, and to having the courage to pursue it honestly, even when it leads somewhere unexpected. Noah, you are a fortunate man. Everdeen, you've chosen well. His smile was genuine, if bittersweet. And I have some growing yet to do before I'm ready for what you both have found. So I'll go seeking it, but I'll carry this lesson with me, that true love sees clearly and doesn't settle for less than it deserves. After he departed, Everdeen found a package on her doorstep, a collection of letters he'd written during his travels, tied with a violet ribbon. The note attached read, "So you might see the world through my eyes while you build your own here. With love and gratitude for teaching me what genuine devotion looks like." Reginald called once more before returning to England. The meeting was brief, but kind. "I'm going back to finish becoming someone worthy of finding," he told her. "What you said about learning me versus learning about me. I heard it, and you were right." He paused at the door. "Perhaps in another life, Miss Treebright." "Perhaps," she agreed gently, "but in this one, I wish you well." When Noah formally asked her uncle for permission to marry, he did so with the straightforward honesty that characterized all his actions. "I cannot offer wealth or grand estates," he said, his scarred hand resting on the armrest of his chair without shame. "My income is modest, sufficient for comfort, but not for luxury. I cannot take her to England or Constantinople. What I can offer is a life of intellectual companionship, steady devotion, and a home where she will be valued for exactly who she is." Her uncle studied him for a long moment. "You're aware that Reginald Ravencroft could have given her considerably more?" "I am, sir. But Miss Treebright did not choose based on what could be given, but on what was genuinely offered, and I offer her everything I am and everything I have." Her aunt, who had initially favored Reginald's suit, surprised everyone by speaking up. "Mr. Whitcombe, when you first began calling on our niece, I confess I thought you too serious, too plain. But these past weeks, I've watched you. You don't perform your affection, you simply live it. That is rarer than rubies." She glanced at her husband. "I believe we should give our blessing." Her uncle nodded slowly. "Then you have it. Though I warn you, young man, Everdeen has a mind of her own. Are you prepared for a wife who will challenge you?" Noah's scarred hand flexed with emotion. "Sir, I'm counting on it. A mind like hers should never be wasted on agreement alone." The engagement was announced quietly, without the fanfare that would have accompanied a Ravencroft union, but those who knew them understood the significance. At church the following Sunday, Mrs. Langford whispered to Mrs. Pritchard, "She chose the scholar after all." "Of course she did," Mrs. Pritchard replied, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Anyone with eyes could see how he looked at her, like she was the only book he'd ever need to read. The weeks before the wedding passed in a flurry of quiet preparation. Everdeen's gown was commissioned, simple ivory silk, with violets embroidered at the hem and cuffs. Noah insisted on no excessive display, but her aunt convinced them both that some ceremony was warranted for those who loved them. Noah visited nearly every afternoon, and they established what would become their pattern. Reading aloud to each other, discussing ideas, walking through the grove where violets grew wild. Sometimes they spoke for hours, sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, simply being present to one another. One evening, as lantern light filtered through the magnolia trees, Everdeen asked, "Do you ever regret that I'm not more exciting, that I won't fill our life with grand adventures?" Noah set down his book, his scarred hand marking the place. "Everdeen, every conversation with you is an adventure. Every time you share a thought I haven't considered, every time you challenge an assumption I've held, that's discovery. Malachi needed to travel the world to find wonder. I need only listen to you speak." She felt tears prick her eyes. "I chose well, didn't I?" "We both did," he replied, pulling her close. 1 week before the wedding, 2 letters arrived on the same day. The first was from Malachi, postmarked from Vienna. "My dear Everdeen, I write from a city of music and light, and I find myself thinking of you often, not with regret. You were right that I needed to be certain, and I'm not yet, though I'm working toward it, but with gratitude. You taught me that love isn't about dazzling someone into submission, but about seeing them clearly and honoring what you find. I'm learning to do that with myself first, to understand my own fire, before I ask someone to stand in it with me. I met a woman here last week. She's a violinist with the Opera House, and when she plays, I see the same quality in her that I saw in you, that ability to find profound beauty in disciplined attention. I'm not rushing anything, but I wanted you to know that your example is teaching me how to approach love with intention rather than impulse. Be happy, dear friend, and know that you made me better simply by refusing to settle for less than I could become. With enduring affection, Malachi. The second letter bore an English postmark and Reginald's seal. Miss Treebright. I hope this letter finds you well and happily anticipating your upcoming nuptials. I write not to interfere, but to thank you for a gift you may not have realized you gave me. You told me that I had learned about you rather than learning you directly. That observation has haunted me in the best possible way. I've spent these past weeks actually speaking with people, not researching them, but engaging with them genuinely. It's harder than I expected, more vulnerable, but infinitely more rewarding. I won't pretend the boy who bullied you is entirely gone, but I'm working daily to ensure he has no voice in the man I'm becoming. You were right that I needed to complete that journey for myself. I hope Whitcombe knows how fortunate he is. I suspect he does. With respect and genuine good wishes, Reginald Ravencroft. Everdeen read both letters twice, then shared them with Noah that evening. They're growing, she said softly, both of them. Because you refuse to accept less than they could be, Noah replied. You gave them the gift of honest reflection. That takes courage. I learned it from you, she said, touching his scarred hand. You never pretended to be anything other than exactly who you are. That gave me permission to do the same. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with magnolia blossoms perfuming the air and violets blooming in abundant clusters throughout the garden. Everdeen woke early, her heart steady, despite the significance of the day. Her aunt helped her dress, fastening the tiny buttons along her spine with careful attention. "Are you certain, dear?" she asked, not because she doubted, but because the question needed to be asked one final time. "I am," Everdeen replied, adjusting her spectacles, "more certain than I've been of anything." The church bells began to toll as her uncle's carriage pulled up to transport them. The ceremony would be intimate, family, close friends, a few neighbors who had watched this courtship unfold with interest. Inside the church, Noah stood at the altar in his best suit, his scarred hand visible at his side. When Everdeen entered, his expression transformed, not with theatrical surprise, but with something deeper: recognition, gratitude, joy so profound it made his eyes shine. She walked down the aisle to him, her steps measured and certain. When she reached him, he extended both hands, scarred and whole, and she took them without hesitation. The minister began the ceremony with traditional words, but Everdeen barely heard them. She was focused entirely on Noah's face, on the way his thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand, on the slight tremor that revealed his emotion beneath his composure. "I, Noah Whitcombe," he said, when the time came for vows, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes, "promise to see you clearly every day of our lives, to honor your mind, your heart, your independence, to be the steady ground from which you can grow, never the ceiling that limits you, to fill our home with books and conversation and quiet devotion, to choose you, Everdeen, in every small moment and every large decision, for as long as I draw breath." Everdeen's own voice was thick with emotion as she replied, "I, Everdeen Treebright, promise to share my world with you completely, to challenge you, laugh with you, grow with you, to see your steadiness not as stillness, but as strength, to honor the passion in your patience, the fire in your constancy, to choose you, Noah, not because you're safe or sensible, but because you're exactly who I want beside me in every season of life." When the minister pronounced them married and invited Noah to kiss his bride, he cupped her face with both hands, scarred and whole, and kissed her with a tenderness that made several attendees weep. The congregation rose in blessing, and hymns swelled beneath the vaulted ceiling. Everdeen heard her aunt sniffling, saw her uncle's proud smile, noticed the way Mrs. Langford dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. As they walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, Everdeen caught sight of two flower arrangements near the door, violets and pale pink roses, with a card that read simply, "For joy and steadiness alike." MD Malachi had sent them from Vienna. Even in absence, he blessed their union. The reception was held in the Treebright garden, where tables had been arranged beneath the magnolia trees and lanterns hung waiting for evening. The feast was modest but abundant. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, seasonal vegetables, and a cake decorated with sugar violets. Noah's colleagues from the university mingled with Everdeen's family, and the conversation flowed easily. Several people approached the newlyweds with congratulations and slightly bemused expressions, as if surprised by how well-matched they appeared. "I confess," Professor Hendricks said to Noah, "I never expected to see you married. You seem so absorbed in your studies." "I found," Noah replied, his scarred hand resting on the small of Everdeen's back, "that some books are meant to be read together." As twilight descended, the lanterns were lit, casting warm golden light through the garden. Someone started playing a violin, a wedding gift from friends, and couples began to dance on the lawn. Noah offered Everdeen his hand, his scarred one trembling slightly. "I'm not a graceful dancer," he warned. "Neither am I," she replied, taking it. "We'll stumble through together." And they did, not with the polish of Reginald's continental training or the exuberance Malachi would have brought, but with genuine joy and occasional laughter when they misstepped. Around them, lantern light flickered through magnolia blossoms, violets perfumed the evening air, and the people who loved them watched with satisfaction. This was not a fairy tale romance of grand passion or strategic alliance. This was something quieter, deeper, more enduring. This was two people who saw each other clearly, chose each other deliberately, and committed to building a life of steady devotion. Epilogue. 5 years later. The house on Maple Street was small but filled with light. Books lined every wall, and violets grew in window boxes outside each room. In the study, 2 desks sat side by side, his and hers, where they worked in companionable silence most mornings. Everdeen had published her first collection of essays the year before, each one exploring themes of choice, identity, and the courage required to know oneself. Noah had contributed footnotes and references, his scholarly precision complementing her lyrical prose. On this particular autumn afternoon, a letter arrived from Vienna. Everdeen opened it with a smile, already recognizing Malachi's energetic handwriting. "Dear friends, I write with news. I'm engaged. Her name is Katerina. She plays violin for the opera house, and she matches my fire without being consumed by it. You were right, Everdeen. I needed to find someone who could stand in the blaze with me. We plan to marry next spring. Any chance you could journey to Vienna for the wedding? I know it's far, but I should very much like you both to meet her. I've told her the story of how I competed for your hand and lost, and how that loss taught me what I needed to become. She says she owes you a debt of gratitude. I remain, as ever, your affectionate friend who learned love by losing it. Malachi. Everdeen passed the letter to Noah, who read it with a growing smile. Should we go? He asked. I think we should, she replied. I've always wanted to see Vienna. And here, I thought you'd chosen me, knowing you'd never see the continent, Noah teased gently. I chose you, knowing that wherever we went together would be enough, she corrected. But that doesn't mean we can't travel. You've been invited to present your research in London next year. Perhaps we could make a journey of it. Vienna, London, maybe even Florence. Noah's scarred hand reached for hers across the desk. Mrs. Whitcombe, are you suggesting we have an adventure? I'm suggesting, she said, squeezing his hand, that steadiness and adventure aren't opposites, that we can build a life of quiet devotion that still contains discovery, that choosing you wasn't choosing limitation. It was choosing a foundation stable enough to support whatever we wish to build upon it. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. Have I told you today that I love you? Only twice, she replied, smiling. But I never tire of hearing it. Through the window, they could see their small garden, where violets bloomed in wild abundance, and a young magnolia tree was just beginning to take root. In the distance, church bells tolled the hour, and the scent of autumn leaves mingled with the last of summer's flowers. This was not the ending Meridian's gossips had predicted 5 years ago. It was quieter than Malachi's passionate fire, simpler than Reginald's grand estates, less dramatic than anyone had expected. But it was theirs, built on genuine seeing, patient devotion, and the radical choice to value depth over dazzle. And in the gentle evening light of their shared study, with travel plans taking shape, and love made manifest in every small gesture, Everdeen Treebright Whitcombe knew she had chosen well. Not because Noah was perfect, or because their life together was without challenges, but because they had built something real, something that grew like violets, quietly, persistently, returning each season with faithful beauty. And that, she had learned, was the truest form of romance, not the grand gesture or the spectacular display, but the steady choice made new each morning to see, to honor, to love. The magnolia tree outside their window stirred in the breeze, its leaves catching the last golden light of day. Inside, two people who had found each other through honesty rather than performance continued their life's work side by side, reading, writing, growing, loving. The courtship was long over. The marriage had only just begun. And in the space between those two truths lay a lifetime of ordinary miracles, waiting to unfold. The end.